Probably a topic for another time would be that I think you could actually write your biography by doing a mini biography of somewhere under 10, maybe 4 or 5 people that you meet in your life that actually direct your life, and by telling about you meeting them and who they are, it would really say a lot about your own life without saying anything about your life. Turn in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes 7:10. Father, I just pray for the focus that only comes from you. Father, I pray for the point of the arrow to be here. I pray for your name to be glorified. Ecclesiastes 7:10. Do not say, why are the old days better than these? For it is not wise to ask such questions. The King James says, don't ask what the cause of this is. Watch out when you start asking for the cause of something in your life. One of my new brother-in-laws asked me, why is everyone around me that's driving an idiot? And I said, because you're the idiot. Don't ask those questions unless you want that answer. If you want to know the cause of something happening in your life, it's going to be you. So I'm going to talk about that. And the title of my message is Living in the Past. And on the 4th of July, my father, who loves old cars, and Paul likes to give me old car magazines. He gives me these magazines because he heard that my father likes old cars. And for the 4th of July, my father has a 51 Ford convertible. I don't know all the details, but it's got the fins. It's very sharp looking. It just gives you that feeling of like, wow. But somebody said to my father, and it was actually me, in the past about these, gee, Dad, they don't make them like they used to. And he said, you're right, they don't. Now they have power steering, they have anti-lock brakes, they have catalytic converters, they have airbags, they even have seat belts, because the old cars don't have seat belts in the back, if you didn't know that. And what would be a great thing to go get an ice cream or drive for a parade on the 4th of July for a half a mile down the street is an awful thing to drive every day to work, to sit in traffic with no air conditioning, the rag top shaking, the car shaking, no shocks. The thing was built more like a tank than something that's about comfort. The seats are not comfortable. You can't move them. If I drive with my younger sister who's short, she moves the seat all the way up to the steering wheel. It moves the passenger seat all the way up. I'm right up against the windshield. I don't like that. We're going to be talking a little bit about something to do with moderation after I give a few definitions. My son, who's not here, but is ample fodder for every time I give a sermon, he can give me something to think about, was eating a juicy pickle on the back porch. And he said, this is so juicy. And he ran in. I said, where are you going? He comes out with a straw, puts it in the pickle jar to suck it down. Hold on, Justice. I am not going to be preaching about reminiscing or reunions. I am not going to be preaching about that great wealth that we have with our past in terms of fond memories or preaching against those things. I am not going to be preaching against juicy pickles. I am going to be preaching about putting your straw in the pickle jar. So I need to give a few definitions because it may be something that we haven't thought that much about. And this may not even apply to many people here, but there may be people here who, God willing, this will be of some benefit to. First, I'm going to distinguish between being homesick and nostalgia. And of course, homesick is a longing for a particular home. Some of you are from other nations, and you miss those nations. And that pain can be unremitting and severe. And I'm actually not going to be preaching about that either, because there's a theoreticalness that you can actually go home, and maybe you are able to. And when you can't, you can cure it sometimes by creating a semblance of home, having some fellowship with other people that are from that home. So I'm not going to be speaking about people that happen to be geographically separated from a place. I'm going to be speaking about more nostalgia. which is the idea that you are actually separated not just from a distance, but from a time which is unattainable. The thing about nostalgia is it's sort of like my lesson on jealousy. It's not just an unremitting, painful feeling. It's a little bittersweet. There's sort of a warm, cool feeling that comes with nostalgia. It's not all bad. It's enough of a hook to keep you there sometimes. What am I talking about? If you're longing for a home with nostalgia, it's not a home far away, but a home far away in time and space. I read a book, and somehow it came to my mind 30 years ago, that says you can't go home again. You can't go back home to your family, back home to your childhood, back home to a young man's dream of glory and fame, back home to places in the country, back home to old forms and system of things, which once seemed everlasting, but which are changing all the time, back home to the escapes of time and memory. Look, Home, an Angel, Thomas Wolfe. Had to read it in 11th grade. Didn't like it, but remembered that from it. So what am I talking about? Some psychology thing here that's going to be of no purpose to people? No, I want to lay these definitions out. There are those people that died that sort of become frozen in time. If I mention names, whether it be JFK or Martin Luther King, Marilyn Monroe, Jimi Hendrix, they get frozen in a time. And they don't suffer from what A.E. Housman said to an athlete dying young. Runners whose renown outran, and the name died before the man. We also could name athletes that played one season too long, that came out that they ultimately were juiced up and it was all a fake, or they used their good name much later to scam and to suck off of people. Very early on in the Civil War, a Union doctor noted that when the soldiers were in the camp, that there would begin to be severe feelings of nostalgia, not just being away from home of a distance, but missing the way it used to be. Think about this. It's the Civil War. If you live near the Mason-Dixon line, one town over, who you used to just play football against, you are now fighting and killing, and families were separated. And it was an awful time, as was slavery. There was one thing that they began to notice that would actually eradicate this nostalgia feeling in them and would cure them of it. It's when they would leave the camps and go into battle. And as they battled, they began to develop a brotherhood and a tightness that would overcome those other feelings that they have. Now, one of the problems with memory in the old days, just like that car, is that it's not as good as we used to think it was. Memory is malleable. People have studied this. It's something that you can bend and shape. That's why when they have lineups, and the Innocence Project talks about this, that somebody that administers a lineup should have no idea who they think the suspect is, because the way the questions are asked will lead people to shape and reshape their memory. Memory is malleable. You look back and all of a sudden you see shine where there was spit. Not that funny. We're going to get into the message here. We're not just going to be doing definitions and things. But I just want to sort of give you a chance to think about that feeling of what we're talking about. Nostalgia, living in the past, that feeling of back in the day. Those were the days. They don't make them like they used to. This is a funny thing. I've heard kids that are 14 years old in Lowell say this to me. I say, well, what day are you talking about? Back in the day, 2007, man. I'm like, this is like my son telling me about a long time ago, which was last week. When I think of living in the camp, I think of Lot's wife. Now, the story of Lot and his wife, and I'm not going to get into Sodom and Gomorrah, an extensive thing. I'm going to just focus on her for a minute. When the two angels came to the city, Lot was at the edge of the city. I'd be at the edge of that city, too. You wouldn't catch me in the middle of it. And as he's at the edge of the city, he says, where's your wife? She's in the middle of the city. They come in, they find her. She's laid down. She's getting her fingernails done. People are fawning over her here. She's going to all these Art Deco places and getting this cool new threads. And it's a big city and there's so much happening and all that stuff. Well, don't worry about it. It doesn't affect me. And she gets told by the angels to head for the hills. Lot says, Lord, I cannot live in a tent with this woman. We cannot head for the hills. At least let us go to some small hick town where she can toot around and be a big fish in a little pond. Fine, go to this small town over here. You don't have to head for the hills. So off she goes, but as she's leaving, she's remembering the makeup kit and the people and that date thing that she was going to do. And, oh man, what happens? She looks back. She looks back. She becomes frozen in time. A salt lick. Nobody knew what that was, so I'll tell you, in the old days, animals used to go and lick salt, and that's how trade routes developed. To get salt is one of the earliest things. She just became a salt lick. What's that? A preservative. She just became frozen in time. That's what it is. She looked back, and boom, she stayed right there. She didn't move forward. That's what she became. That's why she turned into a pillar of salt. I want to say this about living in the past. There is a progression of a harmless digression into a recession, becoming an obsession, crashing into a depression, ending in spiritual oppression. Let me unpack the suitcase here. A progression of a harmless digression is when you get together with your friends, when you have a chance with people who are very close to you, and you have a chance to digress, talk the same stories of what you did when you were 17 years old. I could actually have a couple of my friends tell stories about me, and you would never have me come back up here, that's for sure. But that blast from the past is fine. And it's just an opportunity, and my wife hears me when I drive around North Reading say, this is my old stomping grounds, and I have to tell her the same stories depending on where we're driving. That is fun. My kids, before I go to bed every night, want to hear a story, even if it's the same story. I've run out of them, so that's no problem. I recycle them. But I'm going to go from there to some seriousness here. In those times where you reminisce and have fun, all of a sudden that harmless digression progresses into a recession where you begin to lose productivity in your present-day life. You begin to start to find yourself saying, I used to, all the time. I used to bench this much. I used to fit into this size dress. I used to go out with this guy. I used to live like this. I used to have this and that. It's something that becomes that look back of Lot's wife. Of those were the days, my friends. And then, with a little conscience repression, take your conscience, who starts to say, that's enough of that, pull you back in, and then you repress the conscience, like it talks about in Romans 1. You can't just not believe in God. You have to repress the existence of God, who is everywhere. You have to hold that beach balloon under the water. It's not a rock you're holding down there, it's a beach balloon. And then you begin to develop an obsession. And I want to talk about Facebook. Okay, here he goes. He's not going to talk about video games for once. Now he's going to talk about Facebook. I'm sure that guy that started it is sweating right now that I'm going to speak about Facebook. And I'm not talking again about that chance to stay connected with people that are in other countries and to have connectivity with a small group of people. I'm going to talk about a dilution of relationships that can happen. An obsession with connecting with all these people from the past, your third grade music teachers, assistants, friends, uncles, cousin, and getting them added to your list of friends, and having this tally of friends and friending people and defriending people that aren't real people anymore to you. You haven't seen them for so many years, they're just a memory. And let me tell you something, when it comes to trials and it comes to things, the memory of things will not cut it. You cannot drive on fumes. There is a real problem with people as they try to connect to everything. You can't bring all luggage on all journeys. As you try to connect to everyone and everything in your past, you disconnect to the people right in front of you, the people in your family, the people in your life. Let me tell you something. When you try to connect to an old girlfriend and try to just see how they look and how they're doing and what's happening in their life, you are immediately, as you connect there, as you're turning to them, as you're like Lot, turning back to Sodom and Gomorrah, you're also turning back on your husband, on your daughters, on your children, your husband or your wife, because that is who God has put you with. And that is who God is to have you with for the future. But you're also turning your back on your children, and I'll say why for two reasons. One, because they weren't back then in the day. They weren't there then. And so you're celebrating a time when they have not yet existed, if you have children. And even more than that, when you think about the woulda, coulda, shoulda, the ugly devil triangle of what could have been with this person, you are renouncing and wishing your children did not exist, because your children exist with the person that they existed with. That's how you have those children. And everyone knows you wouldn't have those children if you were with that person. Who here is wishing away their children? Everyone who wishes themselves with somebody besides who they had the children with. This is a really important thing. I'm not splitting hairs. People are dwelling on the past, and we're going to get to that later on. But this dwelling, this living in the past, dwelling on it in your mind, you're living there. When you dwell somewhere, it's where you live. And you begin to live there, and you don't realize, but you're snipping all these relationships. You're disconnecting from your wife, your children. If it's not just a distraction, that's the least it can be. It can be a complete breakdown of the family over this obsession. You can't take all luggage on all journeys. Think about it. You can't stay integrally connected to everybody the same way, the same amount all the time. All you do is dilute. That's all you do. If I have a glass of lemonade here, or when you have gum and you say, oh, you got to have enough pieces for everyone. Oh, I only have one. And then you start ripping it into 400 pieces. You take the lemonade and keep diluting it with water and passing it out. You get water. You don't get any lemonade. But it doesn't end there. See, it doesn't end with the juicy pickle and then the straw and the pickle juice. You begin to suck deep of the straw here, and you crash into a depression. Would've, could've, should've. Midlife crisis. What is that about? Plastic surgery. I used to. It's not even good to say I used to enough anymore. All of a sudden, you have to try to transform your body to that which it probably never was as you assume that it was. But nonetheless, all of a sudden, you start saying that I want to have my face smashed against the windshield like a bug, with facelifts and nose jobs and all the other things that people get done, because now I'm going to feel young, and now I'm going to feel energetic, or I need to spread my wings, or I need to get out there and prove myself again, and I still can roll with these guys over here, and it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop till that depression is full-blown. And people that know you just start to say, hey, what are you doing with your life? It's about this. So when I was a young kid, we used to say the act of contrition. Forgive me, Father, for I've sinned, for things that I've done and things that I have failed to do. Things that I've done and things that I've failed to do. Sins of omission. This is what it's about. It's about sins of omission. You cannot be obsessed with, did I get anybody to friend me today? What's this? Oh my goodness, my second grade social studies class kid. Oh, let me see, they just had pancakes this morning. Your kids are sitting right in front of you. Why don't you tell them about the Lord? Why don't you go hit a ball in a bat or something like that? Why don't you go to the movies with your wife once in a while? Why don't you shut the stupid thing off for 1 minute, take the thing, huck it out the window, and say, how are you doing, kids? How about that? You're my children. I want to spend some time with you. Sins of omission. It's about what you're not doing with your time. It's about what you're missing right now in the present that matters. And it doesn't end there. Then it leads to spiritual oppression. Let me tell you something. I was going to do this time machine thing, but I didn't get there. I can't do everything. But if you go further and further back in this time machine, you need a fuel. And one of the most common fuels for these time machines is alcohol. But alcohol, I'm speaking about the other kind of alcohol. This all of a sudden becomes the fuel to living in the past. Regret, remorse, that bittersweet feeling, the taste as it goes down. Oh, it'll all blow over whatever's going on right now. Look at how it used to be. Back in the day, man. What are you doing? You're planting seeds of future regret because your present is your future's past. So you're just laying an egg for the future that you're going to have to deal with. You got to take the bottle of wine, you got to smash it, say, whatever, if you're behind in the race, and we're going to talk about the race, it won't do any good to go back and start at the beginning and start running again. Where you are right now, you got to start running. You got to start running right now. Philippians 3:8. I consider everything a loss compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them rubbish that I may gain Christ. Rubbish is the nice word because it's the New International. Of course, the word is actually dung. You can think about dog meat and dog mess. And I can tell you a few things about rubbish. Whatever rubbish is, we know it's what you're done with. You eat the banana peel is the rubbish. You have a meal, what's left over is rubbish. That is what your past is over. Paul is saying, I don't care how good it is, how bad it is, or how in between it is rubbish. Amen. Why? Because it's over. It's what you're done with. It's what you're done with. And if you want to go the dung way, that's what you're done with too. It's over. Don't go back to it. Because if your life is strewn with it and you are running a race, you will step in it and you will slip on it. That's the way it is with rubbish and dung. It's just something to step on and something to slip on. That's all that's going to happen. Think about it further down, 13 and 14. One thing I do, forgetting what is behind me and straining on toward the goal to win the prize for which God called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. This idea of pressing forward. People only have eyes on the front of their heads. Angels may have them all over because they live outside of time. But we live in time, which is a one-way street. So we need to go forward on the one-way street. Don't get ticketed for going backward on the one-way street. Move forward on the one-way street. It's sort of like trying to walk on one of those escalators that's going the other way. You're just sitting there all day. You're like on the Stairmaster. And what do? You clog up all the people that are trying to use the thing the right way. Look, you hear it in testimonies in church. This is my testimony. Uh-oh, I get worried. Here we go. I used to be the biggest prize fighter, gangbanger. I used to do drugs. I slept with these many people. Excuse me, are you going to tell me it all about Jesus, or do I have to listen to you brag about how big a sinner you are? A testimony, FYI, is what Jesus did for you. You are testifying of Him, not testifying of yourself. And the bigger your testimony is of yourself, just picture Jesus just shrinking. And then I met Jesus, and that's the story. Okay, that's the end of the story. Let me go get baptized. And you know what? Those people, you just hear it over and over again. Boy, I thought you were ashamed of that stuff. Oh, I am. But let me just tell you about the car I used to have. Let me tell you how many girlfriends I had. Look, I don't care. I'm not impressed. I don't care, and I don't think the Lord does either. Maybe if you want to do a testimony, just count how many times you say I and how many times you say Jesus. Once you've hit the scale and it's flipped over with the eyes, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to drink yesterday's coffee. I don't want day-old donuts. I don't want all the stuff from before. I want to live in the now. Jesus is I am. He said, my name is I am. He is the present one. He is here in the present. He's not in the past. He won't help your past. I got news for you. He can't go to the past. Your past is frozen. He's in the I am, the now. He's all about right now. And he's looking forward to the future. And that's what he does. I read obituaries. I don't know why. My wife knows. I look at them every day. Are you writing your epitaph, or are you waiting for God to write an epilogue? Are you concerned about He was a man of man, unequaled by rivals, did this, had this degree. Is this always the important thing? I've already talked about envy. I don't understand. They'll be this long. Death extinguishes envy. I've never been jealous of anybody that's in that page. I don't say I wish I was them, ever. I don't care what it says about them. I say I'd still rather be me. So it doesn't work, but people do it all the time. Now, I'm going to just speak about the Apostle John. We have in the book of Revelation, the apocalypse. Revelation 1, verse 9. I, John, your brother and companion in the suffering and kingdom and patient endurance that are ours in Jesus, was on the island of Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. On the Lord's day, I was in the Spirit. I just wanted to talk about John. John was one of the original people that met Jesus, an apostle. His brother was James, his mother married to Zebedee, the sons of Zebedee. And he was a fisherman. He was a teenager, undoubtedly, when he met Jesus, young, probably 17. He, with Peter, another fisherman, Andrew, who told Peter, Peter told James and John, they met this carpenter named Jesus. A carpenter is just the kind of guy that put things together. And then they meet this guy. The carpenter's a regular guy. And yet, instead of just making things out of regular things and making beautiful things out of it, he starts making things out of their life. He starts building their life and changing their life. They walk with him. They sleep with him. They eat with him. They tell stories with him. They joke with him. They laugh with him. Fast forward 70 years, he's on the island of Patmos. He's probably 80, 90 years old. Read Ecclesiastes 12 when you get a chance. What happens when you get old? You're stooped over. The grinders, they fall out. They're few. A lot of problems happen. You lose hair. It's happening. And he could have looked back and said, those were the days with Jesus. But then, oh man, Acts of the Apostles. That's why I didn't write Acts. I wrote the Gospel of John. This is how it was. All of a sudden in Acts, the church starts growing. But then Stephen gets martyred. And then right where there's the passage about Peter getting released from prison, we celebrate and we read that story. We always skip over the first verse that says that James was put to death by the sword. And that when it pleased the people to do that, they then took Peter. James was his brother. The bullets are real. This is Brandon Lee finding this out. What does he live through in his life? How easy could it be to live in the past and say, I'm banished on this island of Patmos. If you go there now, oh, it's beautiful, it's great, there's a bunch of monasteries there. He's banished on a deserted island. He's an old man. He's alone. He's by himself. They've all died. They've all been killed. There's nobody left. Where is his mind? Where is his frame? Where is he going? What is he thinking about as he's sitting there rotting? What is he doing? It says he's there. It's the Lord's day. He's in the Spirit. What does he see in the Spirit? He sees the future. You're going to see that yearning, that longing, that thing that you have for the past in your childhood or whatever that you can't have. You need to do a 180, a 2-point reversal for wrestlers and flip that to the future. The yearning for the future, for moving forward. Because look at what he sees here. And I never saw this till the Spirit revealed this. This is not recycled food here. It's on Revelation 6, verses 9 through 11. When he opened the fifth seal, he saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. They called out in a loud voice, how long? Remember Paul, who strove for the goal and to receive the prize. The prize. Now come back. What does he see? He sees the scroll open. He sees heaven. And what does he see? He sees the altar of God. And he sees those who had been slain under the altar for the testimony. And they're saying, how long? And then it says that each of them was given a white robe. And they were told to wait a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and brothers who were to be killed as they had been completed. What John saw, what he saw when he saw heaven, when he saw the altar, when he saw things, what he saw, he said, I saw those who had been slain for the testimony. Who did he see? He saw his brother, James, Peter, Paul, Thomas, Thaddeus, Bartholomew. He saw those people, the guys. He saw them in heaven. He saw them saying, Lord, when is the time? A little bit longer. It's not yet time. We want that reunion. When is it? That yearning, that longing. We want to be together. You want to be together? You want to have the ultimate reunion? Bring your family to heaven. I want you all to be with me in heaven. Bring the people to heaven. Then you'll have plenty of time to go over what happened, when, and whatever. Look forward. Look for the ultimate thing. Listen, family is eternal. The family of God, Jesus. When Paul said, I have this thing, I want to be with Christ and die, which is better by far, but for now I'm to go on living in the body and doing meaningful service. He's like a woman that has missed her husband, has been away from him so long, but she's with her children. And she gets called by him, will you come and see me? And she says, I do want to see you more than anything. But for the present time, I'm with the children, and I have to watch them. But I will see you, and I will be united to you, and I will see you soon. And that's what I want, is that idea of soon. That yearning, that longing, that craving. It's not a sin. It just needs to be turned around. It needs to be looking forward. You need to have the hope of heaven. You need to believe that I want my whole family to be there. I want to be before Jesus. I want to be that way. I read this poem. I don't know where I found it, but in 1830, 16-year-old Sarah Hodgson, a mill worker in Lowell, Mass., wrote these sweet lines to her parents back home in New Hampshire. New Hampshire was further away from Lowell than China is right now in terms of how long it would take to get there. There was no Skype. Anyone who's under 20 years old, there was no way to communicate with them. Letter took a long time. She couldn't see them. They didn't have pictures back then. She's 16 years old. She's in a sweatshop. She's trying to help the family, and she says, I wish you well from all my heart, although we are so far apart. If you die there and I die here, before one God we shall appear. You can't take all luggage on all journeys. When Jesus rose again, he saw the resurrected Jesus. And I never understood this, but the resurrected Jesus still had his wounds. He wasn't healed of them, but will be healed of every disease and every problem completely with the resurrected body that we have. But he saw Thomas, and when he saw Thomas, who had said, I won't believe that he rose unless I put my fingers in his wounds. And then when Jesus saw him, he said, Thomas, put your fingers in my holes. Believe. And Thomas says, my Lord and my God. What did he tell him to put in there, his fingers? No, he told Thomas to put his doubts in those wounds. Put your sins in those wounds. Put your past in those wounds. Bury them in my wounds and look forward to seeing me in heaven, being reunited, the family of God. Family is for eternity. You say, my family doesn't know Jesus, then have them meet Jesus. Pray for them. If they can't, they're too far gone, you keep praying for them. You're not the one to decide that. If you don't have any family, then make family. Bring people to know the Lord. You'll be concerned.